Hi, guys. I should just say, first of all, thanks everybody for coming, and thank you to ARRI as well, please, because I've watched these for years on YouTube, and it's pretty rad to be here standing in front of the big audience. So thanks to ARRI specifically for the invitation, and obviously thank you to everybody who's come. So as already has been discussed, basically we're talking about large format, and as again discussed a moment ago, I had the opportunity to use a large format camera for my last film, and I learned a lot from it, and found it to be, I just found it to be something that was very special for ourselves, for Barry and myself, for many reasons, but largely because I find when I'm working with Barry, something that we talk about a lot is this idea of immersiveness, and which basically, I guess I'll go into in a moment, but basically that discussion is about like bringing the audience in close proximity and close emotional connectivity to our subjects. For me, the LF, the 65 large format at large, does that for me. And it does that for a number of reasons, but that we'll go into as we kind of move along in the conversation. But that's largely my thesis for the day, and sort of what I'd love to have you leave understanding, at least from my perspective. And and by the way, I'd love to have this to be a conversation too. So whether this is my perspective and sort of what my ideas are, clearly there's a lot of talented people in this room that I would love to hear from. I'm sure we all would love to hear from. So as we're having this discussion, I can kind of see you. If you raise your hand high, let's get this conversation going so it's not just me chatting for hours and hours and hours. But basically, my feeling about it is that it's this idea of immersiveness. I'm a sucker, and I'm sort of very passionate about proximity from subject to lens and the power of that. It's something that Barry and I talk about when doing Beale Street and Moonlight, and also Medicine for Melancholy, and something that I sort of try to take to every project. When discussing this idea of immersiveness, being obsessed with how close I can get my lens to a subject to feel an emotional connectivity, these large format cameras have something that Super 35 or 16 or whatever sort of doesn't have. By no means am I saying that like this is the camera that I will only work with from now on. I don't think that I'm saying that. It's just a tool, but it's one that I find to be very helpful and very powerful when making these kind of choices. So just a broad outline of today. We have one camera, and we have some actors that are around. I see them waiting on the sidelines. But what we're going to do basically is set up a quick scene. I've got a little weird idea as to what the scene might be about. And then we will perform the scene a number of times. And each time we'll try to find a new shot, a new perspective, a new way of seeing the scene, and how that relates to large format. Because basically, I feel like, I said it already. Anyway, let's bring the actors into this conversation. So come on in, guys. I think we're going to switch these chairs around. Sorry, I'll keep chatting while we do this, but sure. Let's switch these seats around. Come on. It's interesting. We oftentimes hear people. Thanks, guys. We oftentimes hear people talk about large format or large resolution, high resolution discussions as something that actors don't really like because there's maybe an aging actor or an actress, and the high resolution sees all these maybe we call them flaws. But while resolution is high and you see detail, what's interesting for me, and you'll hopefully see it in a moment, is let's say, for example, we've all seen ourselves, or actors have seen themselves rather, on maybe a 50 mil close-up. Say it's about this size. Well, now with an LF or with a 65, with that same distance from subject to lens, which emphasizes, again, this thing that I'm obsessed with about emotional connectivity, all of a sudden now we're seeing here, or bigger, depending. So all of a sudden now we're giving actors and actresses while feeling the same sort of sense of a close-up, we're now giving them room to express, and we're now giving them space, and seeing, I think, more performance in a way that I think has not really been, I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, because I think, again, going back to what Anne said, I think we're talking about these large format cameras largely as sort of visual effects pieces and sort of vistas and things like this. For me, it's actually a really sort of emotive performance camera. Let's get into some examples. So the scene, just quickly, just so we understand the scene, these guys are, boyfriend, girlfriend. They are having a bit of a fight, not really happy with each other. So there's a bit of a sadness and frustration here. And we have our bartender, come on down to the end of the bar. It's just, anyway, just giving you some context. But basically what's going to happen is at some point, my friend here is going to come and grab a drink because he's desperate for one. And have a chat with the bartender because they're not getting along. We'll have this camera move a number of different ways. The first one we're going to do, actually, let's do this before we even get too far started. Hey, can we remove this light? Just to give the camera a little bit more room to it. We're going to do a little bit of a push-in. Just take it away completely. Yeah. What the idea, and hopefully you'll get across with this sort of push-in as my friend gets up to go to the bar, and we're going to push in on this young lady, is how shallow the depth of the field is, while still seeing him physically at the other end. We're gonna rack focus and keep our focus on our foreground character. And the idea, and sort of what I discovered from shooting Beale Street, is this emphasis of focus shift as we push in, I think, and I would argue, is just much more deeply felt on the large format than it would be on a Super 35 or a 35mm sensor or gate. So you guys ready for do you want to mark a 1 and 2, or you guys feel good just to give it a shot? How do you feel? You ready? Okay. I'm going to come back here and watch. Let's actually back up a little further. Didn't realize we have now this weird mirror bounce. Bernhardt, can we have a little, let's put some Duvetine on the mirror, because we have a little problem. Yep. Yeah, hi. In any case, while he's doing that, we can discuss, I'm sure you guys have seen the LF, or many of you guys have, but just to talk about it while that's all happening, even now I can sort of feel the difference between, large format again and Super 35. The sharpness she is at versus the out of focus our two friends are at, I can already sense the depth. And I can already sense my perspective shifting to our foreground in a way that I sort of find powerful for me. This is something that is, with, I think, 35mm. What lens are we on right now? Was it 40? That's a 40. We'd almost be able to probably split the focus here, is my guess, if we were on Super 35. And here we have the ability to really quite isolate. And isolation, in this case, as it in a large part of what I do is try to do that. Beale Street, for example, is mostly told through the perspective of the main character, Tish, and there's VO in it, and we're really, throughout the film, seeing things, for the most part, almost 99% of the time, through her perspective. And if this was a scene in Beale Street, for example, I would be doing exactly this. And it's funny, there's actually a few shots that quite resemble this, to be honest with you, in the movie, where all of our action is taking place in our background, and she might be silent, she might be just listening to this scene, but our minds and our perspective, and therefore our emotional connection to the scene, is with her. And I think clearly, even just right off the bat, I'm seeing that happen. In any case, we'll do this move in a moment, and I think you'll even emphasize it more. Any questions so far as we get this last thing? You guys are good? Let's do this. Let's show this shot, and then we can talk about that. So, everybody ready? We'll just kind of connect with each other for a second. Bartender's ready. Camera's ready. Yeah. Okay. So, I'll give you a cue to stand. It'll be during the push-in. So we'll do camera, and then action will be you standing up and going to the bar. Okay. And action. Pushing in. Yeah. Action. But, okay. Let's go back to 1. And camera. Camera. Action. Action. Bar, yeah. And what I love here too is even seeing them background, but seeing her in the foreground, and bring your head a little lower and like kind of disregard them. Don't even look at them at the bar. Bring your head to the side. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this to me is an example of the large format. I feel like, when I'm doing Beale Street or et cetera, I mean, this clearly works as well, clearly in Super 35. We've seen the shot 1,000 times. It's not that it's unique to filmmaking language, but that it's only unique in regards to how much more connective I am with our foreground here. It's just unique again. I mean, in regards to sort of focal range, 40 mil now, I'm seeing more. I'm seeing the width as well as the height. To me, this is sort of a good example of it. Anyway, let's go back to 1. And let's do another one. So let's do a different shot here now. Actually, is there any questions before we do that? Discussing large format. Anybody have any ideas? Otherwise, we'll just continue with some new shots, some new perspectives. Okay, cool. Let's put, oh, sorry, was there one? Go ahead, just shout it out.
Oh, well, large format has its downsides if you're used to work with Super 35, actually, because you have to light more if you want to have the same depth of field, really. What you don't mention, if you want to keep the same depth of field for 2 shots or 3 shots, you have to light about 1 more stop or 2 more stops, really.
You are correct, sir.
What do you think about it, actually?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is something to consider for sure. I mean, and something we considered on the film as well. I think you have to sort of have the right, this is a good discussion for sure, because you have to write the right story for this. This machine, I don't think, is right for every movie. In Beale Street, for example, like I said a moment ago, the movie is about really told from one person's perspective. And so, yes, there were moments where I had to consider what you're talking about, but largely, even if it was doing a group shot, like you see here, and like I mentioned a moment ago, even in a 3-shot here, our focus is with our main character. And so this was actually a positive thing for us. And a tool that I don't know that I really had in my arsenal before this. If doing a 3-shot, for example, on Super 35, it might be difficult, in fact, for me to get as shallow as I needed to be able to isolate my character and then therefore isolate my audience to see, to connect with the character in a way that is specific. So, correct, absolutely. It could be for a different kind of film, maybe one that is not about, someone's singular perspective. It could be that you could find yourself in difficult situations, no doubt. I also think, though, just on the same topic, and just to defend the format a little bit, these cameras are quite sensitive to light. I think the only time in which I remember going through the film and having a difficult time making sure I had enough depth of field was largely only in my night exteriors. Even for day and night interiors, if I had to, bump up a couple ISOs to get me a foot or 2 more, depending on the lens, of course, this was not such a problem. It's a really good point, though. I don't disagree with you. But it is something that I find more in regards to a positive thing for this film, and just another tool again in the cinematographer's sort of toolbox, whatever. And I think again, it's funny, all these new technologies, and we're talking about all these different large format things. We have new lenses now. We're showing it here. I don't know that I necessarily knew before this. These cameras came out, that I was yearning for a format that gave me even less depth of field. However, it was only in its sort of creation and opportunity to shoot the movie on it that I found, oh, this is actually a wonderful tool that allows me to tell stories in a way that I find powerful. So does that make sense? Sorry, that kind of went on for a while. Because I want to basically, what I want to do is, as we go through, change our perspective by which we see the scene through. So now we're going to do our boyfriend's perspective. Let's go to a new lens. Let's go to maybe the next one up. What is it? 58? Ooh, 58. So this shot now, I think, is going to basically begin as a 2. And as he rises, I want you to boom up and follow him over horizontally to become a 2-shot of our bartender and our subject. We can talk about while they're doing that is some of the lighting stuff that's going on here too. We're going to do a lighting change at some point, but right now we're sort of in a day interior bar scene, as maybe you can tell. We have our Roscoe soft drop out there, the backlights behind it to kind of illuminate the windows, and the drop is a tungsten 2800K. So this is the idea. We have a 4K pushing through. Right now it's quite glowing up those windows, which is a little funny, but maybe we'll talk about that later. But let's put maybe a double in it. Just bring that down a little bit. Okay. Again, about subjectivity, let's find a way to start with a 2. Can we back up a little bit? Or find a new frame. But as you know, as we're going here, the idea again, I keep doing that, is again trying to find subjectivity within our format. So my hope here is, while we still have a 2-shot, our focus is going to be with our foreground character. Go for it.
Can you bring my mic back up? I got a question. You said that if you're same distance to the subject,
Yes.
you actually get more.
Yes.
The same focal length.
Correct.
What if you move closer to get the same angle of view? What does
It's funny.
What does that do?
When you were talking about this, I was interested in how you presented it, because it's actually the opposite of how I think about it.
I didn't come
Yeah.
up with this myself. This was another DP telling me this, that he likes to actually just get closer
Yes.
to now be more intimate with the subject, having the camera closer in.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think, so yeah, agreed. But so for me, in a weird way, if you're talking about the difference between formats, I find that maybe this is how my brain works, I find that it's easier to express the difference when you don't change the distance. Because again, going back to the thing that I'm obsessed with is like, what happens when you get closer or further away from a subject on what focal length? There is something that's too close, and there's something that's too intimate, and storytelling for me and how I work with Barry is all about that dance, about where my camera is and how, how far, I don't know how to talk about this, but how far I want to go into someone's personal space. Mm-hmm. Whether that's about an actor or whatever, but mostly about character. So I guess that's how I relate to it, because if I'm finding myself 4 feet from a subject on a 50mm lens, there's something about perspective, and that's how depth shifts on a face, let's say. So I might not want to change that, because to me that perspective is what is important. Almost more so in my mind than frame size. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How I feel in relationship to a subject through a lens, it's almost arbitrary if it's here or here in my mind, because it's more about depth and how I feel about that kind of depth. Okay. So now that I'm saying that, say it's here, arbitrarily, but now it's here, and I'm still feeling the same feeling about that relationship between subject and lens, but yet I get more expressiveness.
So you're saying, it seems like we have this parameter space of 3 factors. There's distance of the subject, there's focal length, and then there is the sensor size.
Sure.
And out of that, you get some sort of look.
Yeah.
And you seem to think that at a given distance with a given focal length, that's what you like.
Yes,
and then
exactly.
the angle of view kind of trails behind.
I wouldn't phrase it as falling. I would almost phrase it as a gift of more, because and that's how I see the power of these new tools being given to me, because and that's how I see the strength of the format in my mind is that It's almost like the depth of field, going back to your earlier discussion of depth of field, is like, that's established now. And more what I'm interested in is how now I can sort of allow an actor or an actress to express themselves within that depth in ways that I find gives them more space, which I think is a bit powerful. We can talk about a lot of things about cinematography, but the actor is clearly a very important part of this process. And if I can give them more space.
I thought it was the camera.
Yeah, I know. I know we're here for the week talking about lots of ego, but we are also there for them, as they are for us, but we're there for them too, clearly. And so if I can give them more space to perform, I think that's a positive thing. Oftentimes I feel like as cinematographers we're asking actors to like sit on a chair, the light is good here, and don't move, and perform. And I think that's a real, I don't know, to each their own, but that's a real shame for me. And so for me, I think, going back to the conversations of the LF and large format generally, if I can give them more, I think this is a positive thing. Not only for them as artists, but also for story and expression. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let's try to show that. Oh, good. Lovely angle. Thank you. Awesome. Let's rehearse this. We've never tried this yet. Sorry, we'll fumble through it with everybody watching. But what I want to have happen is as he stands, we boom up, and simultaneously, most likely, move right. Yeah? You want to try it? It begins with a conversation, though, about depth again. Sorry, this is going to be a little redundant just because it keeps proving the same point, but what I'm excited about in this regard is just sort of the separation by which I'm seeing our foreground and character and where my perspective lies. We'll keep doing this a couple more times and then stop. Oh, the gaffer's so good, see? We need them. Thanks, buddy. Okay, ready? And action. Woo! Let's do it again. Let's do that slower. Yeah, sorry, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. I know this, and I'll say this too, this isn't exactly a conversation. This part is not about LF, but just about how I work. And how the choice between characters. Sometimes in a scene, we want the perspective to change. And again, I'm just going with a different character here now to emphasize that. Yeah, and action. Go ahead and stand. Okay. I kind of like that, actually. And that's weird, but it's sort of cool. Can we go closer? No, it's good. I like that, actually. That's pretty weird. That's kind of interesting. Let's do the same thing in reverse. Can we do it in reverse? So as he goes back to sit with her, no, stay. And as he goes down to sit down, we'll bring him back down. And action. Go down. Go back. Ooh. Cool. Okay. I think you guys get the point. I'm not going to do that again. I think the idea is clear. The idea of the format for me is about that. Let's do this. Can we set up like a medium shot and just show some more focal lengths? Because I think that would be really nice. Just so you guys can see the signature primes and sort of see how they react to the sensor. I think that would be maybe a very sort of educational tool. Yeah, exactly. Let's do that. Yeah, let's go for the widest and go to the tightest. Why not? I think that, that would be helpful, yeah, to sort of see how all these focal length ranges work on a close-up. I think that would be nice. Any questions?
It's a question for students. For example, you've got all the equipment here and steady cams and stuff. And would have any advice for how to do handheld cinematography or just dealing with tripods and stuff, how to best use that to get the best shots?
Oh, you mean just when you're lack of equipment, what can you do to still tell a story cinematically?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know. Our choices, I think, for me, have always come from story. So in a weird way, I find myself in positions constantly where I'm trying desperately not to let the medium dictate what I'm doing. So I think that's really important, to not let, even with no money, to not let the lack of resources be something that inhibits choice. And, which I guess maybe what I'm really getting at there a little bit too, sort of in a sideways way, is I think it's important to conceive of films. I mean, this is a conversation you'll have to have with your director and your producers and things like that, but make sure that your film you're making is conducive to your budget. I mean, this is sort of a little bit of an aside from cinematography and definitely aside from the LF discussion, but an important one that I actually do have an opinion about. The first film I made with Barry was made in 2009, I think, 8. It's called Medicine for Melancholy, and we shot that. Everyone mostly here is too young to remember what the HVX 200 is. It's an old camera at this point. It's funny, it's not that old. But point is, there's a very small camera that was made for, at a very affordable price, and for us as young filmmakers, it was a tool that was afforded to us to tell a story. But it was only good for that story because the aesthetic that we approached that movie with could support the material we were shooting. I know that's sort of a weird conversation a little bit, but I think it was important that in talking with Barry about that project, we found a way to still use the tools available to us to support something aesthetically. If we wanted to make a period piece or a classical drama with sweeping cranes, I think that would be a real problem. Not because we didn't have the money to do it, but it also wouldn't have supported the concept of the story and the way in which we wanted to tell it aesthetically. So does that make sense? Like you're trying to match those two things.
Yeah.
I think that's really critical because what you're sort of getting at a little bit is the conflict sometimes that you can run into when those things don't match. And that can't be on your shoulders as a cinematographer. That's a problem that probably started months earlier, before you even arrived. And so it's a bit about choosing projects properly and things like that discussion a little bit, to be honest with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, wow, let's move in. Let's move in closer. Hey. Oh, cheers. Let's find a frame that doesn't look off the set, for one thing, if we can. Let's move the table out that we have in our foreground and move our character forward. Exactly. Just.
I don't know if you guys in the audience can see this, but you got the LDS data. Can we go back to the camera, please? You got the LDS data on the top of the screen there, so you can always see the focal length that they're using. Can we go back to the LF, please, on the big screen? There you go. So on the top, you see ARRI prime, T1.8, that's the signature prime, and then we're on 18 millimeter right now.
Sky panel back in for a close-up look for him. We're just going to bring a light in to sort of see this a bit easier, just a little bit. What's up there? Oh, yeah. Can you guys, I'm just out of curiosity, has anybody not seen the difference? I know technically we can have the conversations about numbers and resolution and things like that. Who here does not feel the difference of this format right now? I'd love to know, curious. Yeah? We all feel it. Good, that's a good thing, I think. That's sort of, what I wanted to make sure was clearly understood and sort of felt in the room. This festival is lovely, but it can get pretty techy. And I think what I wanted to make sure was that we discussed how it felt to us in the room. I find myself here, the kind of depth I'm seeing, but yet, I don't, for example, what is this, the 20? Is it 20 mil? Oh, wow, 18. I don't feel that, I know we're seeing a little bit of, well, not a little bit, quite a lot of depth here. Our foreground character is quite close, and our subject is, 3-4 feet away. It's weird, I know, it's weird to talk about this, but I don't feel emotionally removed from him right now, for example. If I'm telling a story here and I'm seeing the scenes sort of come together and I'm making some lighting choices, and I don't know that I feel so removed from him right now in an emotional value way, in a perspective way. And I think, again, this is an example of large format and sort of what I love about it and how to sort of communicate and tell story. What's the next focal length up from this? 20. 21, okay, cool. We'll do that next. But well, let's let Bernhard get a light set. Can we also put more wire in the 4K? Like, lovely, okay. Can we go down to 20% on the new sky panel, please? Okay, cool. Let's go to the 21. We won't go through. We'll go through all of them, but we'll go quickly. I don't think anybody here wants to watch us change lenses all day. But I think it'd be important to everybody to sort of at least just see a quick moment of each length, just to sort of get a sense of it. I think what we'll do is after this exercise, we'll probably take a little break. Oh, there's a question. Hey, buddy. Go for it. You can come closer and just shout it out, too, if you want.
What are the to-go lenses with this format right now? Like, you know, anyways, on Super 35, the ET5 mil was like the close-up lens. This 35 was like the mid-shot lens. What changed with this format for you? Like, what's your to-go lenses with this format?
I can say for Beale Street, the 65 was on most of the time. It was a lovely portrait lens for us. And I guess I'll say this to that, just to quickly aside for a second, just try, like the way I think about this and how I sometimes talk about large format, these things are, you know, portraiture photography for a long time has been done on medium format cameras, still cameras. You know, what are movies besides moving portraits? So it's a really interesting way of thinking about that in regards to portrait photography and how it relates to storytelling. So I say that in regards to like the 65 being something for me was a great portrait lens on Beale Street. It gave me a sense of closeness, but again, a sense of depth. So the 40 mil and the 65, I think for me was like a great sort of performance lens and was largely on the camera most days. Of course, it changed as we went into wides and went into telephoto positions, but I'd say for me, who's here? The DNA is the 35, I think, is the widest, or 32? I can't remember, something like that. That was our wide spectrum. I think with the 110, there's a 150 and a 200 mil. I think the 110 was on most of the time if we wanted to go telephoto. And I think that probably is related to this as well, to be honest with you. I mean, it's different, of course, but you know, going back to my conversation about how I feel about depth and how that dictates so much about proximity and size, I think in a weird way, the answer is mostly in regards to how I feel about closeness and proximity, less so size. 21, yeah? Thanks. Okay. Cool. Let's go to the next one up. Any other questions while we keep going on these lenses? Cool. What we'll do is we'll go through these. I think after that, we'll take a little bit of a break. Go for a little chat, and then we'll come back. And I think after that, we'll get into some more lighting choices and talk about sort of some of the LED technology and how that affects things. But we'll get through these quickly, I think, and then go for a bit of a break, is my guess. What's this one? 25. I'd say this is probably getting pretty close, by the way, to something that was like a medium shot for us in the movie. And I think, again, we've actually ended up, you see how close our lens is to our foreground character's shoulder. This is often where I end up placing the camera in films in many ways. I love to sort of see how close I can get to the subject, and here we are quite closely. So the 25 is actually, I'm finding now, this is quite lovely, and I think largely, if I was starting a scene from a wide and coming into like a medium shot, I probably would be around this focal length, to be honest with you. I'm giving our character some room to breathe. I'm seeing the relationship between our foreground, our background, but yet my focus physically and emotionally is with our subject here, and this would be a lovely lens. I quite like this 25. Let's go up. Next one. Hey. Sorry?
I was just wondering your process of kind of deciding how close you want the camera
yeah.
to be with them.
Totally.
Is it during camera tests that you kind of go play around with the actors, or yeah, just your process?
I mean, I think, so this is something that like I find I don't decide until the day, to be honest with you. You know, I think these kind of choices about sort of, you know, whether it's 4 feet or 4.5 feet or whatever it might be are really sort of nuanced and have everything to do with blocking and background and space. I'm someone, I think that, you know, I think especially because of where I've come out of in terms of low budget filmmaking, I find myself really being a very reactionary cinematographer and not someone who makes quite a lot of choices in that level of specificity prior to me even arriving, to be honest with you. When I find a space on a scout or a prep with the director, it's only then that things start to coalesce aesthetically for me in terms of color palette and things like this. And then it gets even more fine-tuned in terms of your specific question, which is proximity. Like, this is interesting because what focal length is this? 58. So I think I'm a little close here. I don't know how you guys feel. Do you guys feel a little? I feel like I'm a little close. I might back up our camera a little bit. And this is just to do with how I feel about it, less to do with like a mathematical equation or something I decide on the day, but more to do with, you know, depending on the scene, of course, but like if I'm just going to be, you know, not too dramatic, I might back up even more, like 4 more inches. Let's just scoot around that leg. Yeah. Like that's kind of nice. And that's just me, that's nothing to do with anything besides how I feel about it. I don't tend to sort of make like rules for myself, which is sort of a different conversation, but that's sort of a thing for me that I kind of hate to do, but some people love to do, is make these regimented rules in pre-production as to, you know, only allowing yourself to make certain choices. I kind of can't stand that, to be honest with you. So this is sort of on the fly.
And so do you go about doing like a storyboard or photo board before, as part of your pre-production process?
The films that I've been a part of so far, with the exception of a few, when there's some scenes that might be challenging, as a scene in Beale Street, for example, that we did a previs for because it's quite technically complicated. But you know, traditionally or more broadly for the films I've been a part of, a shot list has been something that I've sort of stuck with. Boarding things can be quite. Let's keep going one up after that when you're ready. Storyboarding I find to be a little bit too rigid for the filmmaking, the kind of filmmaking that I'm doing, and especially when you're doing small films where you're reacting to weather or you're reacting to any other circumstance that comes about when you're making these movies. For me, a shot list is something that's been a helpful tool to walk into every day with, but anything more than that I find to be a little bit too rigid for me. Yeah.
If I can, just one last question.
Please.
Just wondering what's your kind of relationship to your actors? Like in pre-production, once you know the cast, do you kind of, go and make friends with them, hang out with them a little bit, or just?
Oh, that relationship is massive and something that I think kind of happens quite naturally usually. Whether that's like, going to a dinner with them before you're beginning. Sometimes people organize like a cast and crew dinner before you begin, and you're invited to like that with producers, with maybe the AD, production designer, costume designer. You all hang out, hopefully, a bit, and get to know each other on a personal level to where you find yourself very comfortable. That's the first step, I'd say. But yeah, throughout the production, you're definitely, I find myself to be I tried my best anyway to be somewhat of an ally in those spaces. If I'm finding myself, if I'm getting too close and I can sort of sense they might be not super comfortable with that, even though, it depends, even though maybe if it's needed, of course, you have to say like, hey, listen, I'm getting kind of close to you. I know but I kind of need to. But if you don't have to, sometimes I'll back up a little bit to give them the room. And so, it's a bit of it's a bond that is very unique and very sensitive. And so I think having a bit of an emotional sensitivity is critical in that relationship. Being able to sense, how they're feeling on the day and how you're feeling on the day, and getting to know that sort of dynamic is critical. So it's something that I find is kind of a bit of an unwritten and not discussed a lot topic. You don't learn these things in film school. I think you learn them from doing a little bit. But it's an important thing to make sure you're aware of anyway, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And so what is this one? 95. pretty. And let's go one up. Let's go one more. 150, yeah, beautiful. It's interesting. I mean, again, well, we'll talk about it on the next lens because I'm sure it'll be even more evident. But like, a 95, my association with thinking about Super 35, 95 is quite close. I mean, that's going to be quite in the same proximity. I might be even in here, but now I'm feeling that sense of telephotoness, of that sort of again going back to that proximity conversation. But I'm actually seeing here now. I think that's kind of wonderful, to be honest with you, and something I find very exciting about this format.
Hello. It works. Hey,
Hey.
I'm over here.
Hi.
Before it was said that you mixed two different sensor sizes, so the Alexa Mini, I think it was, and the ARRI 65. And did you do this for artistic purposes to create different moods or emotions, or was this for technical reasons?
It's funny. Well, the truth is I did not, actually, but I can talk about why I did not. So on Beale Street, every single shot is shot in the 65.
All right, so
yeah.
I guess it was a misunderstanding.
It's okay, no, but I can say for me, it's interesting you say that because there were moments in the film that I was asked to, not asked, but we discussed not doing 65 and doing Mini, for example. There's a shot, I won't give away the story or give away the moment, but there are moments where technically it could have been a lot easier, just physically, or even just the sheer size of the cameras themselves could have fit into places otherwise. But it was important for me for the film to hold on to that integrity and hold on to that field of view. Going back a little bit to sort of the conversation of less to do with resolution and numbers, but how I feel about these things, and how they affect me on an emotional level and therefore on a storytelling level. It's too critical sometimes to, unless, like, I guess we were talking about the question of when you do want to change is different, but I find myself battling myself sometimes and making sure I'm not, acquiescing or like, taking the easy way out just because physically it might be easier. I think filmmaking is a bit of like, sometimes can be a stick to your guns conversation. So every shot in Beale Street is on the 65 because it was just too valuable. And I found, especially for scenes where the emotional integrity needed to be sort of carried through, I didn't want to sort of let that go. Different conversation though. I mean, there's ever so many needs to sometimes change format. The person behind you's question earlier about depth of field and how it relates to large format. Sometimes maybe that's a positive thing. So, again, going back to the idea that this is not the camera to rule all cameras, and neither is the 65, but it's just a tool for you to sort of tell stories with properly. And for us on Beale Street, the 65 was the right choice. For someone else, the LF is the right choice. For someone else, 60 millimeters is the right choice. And I think it's just a lovely time to be a cinematographer, and that's sort of what I wanted to make sure we come across today.
Thank you. And while I have the microphone, I'd like to ask, do you think that because you were talking about the subjectivity of the characters, and would you reckon that shooting Moonlight on the ARRI 65 would have been a good thing, or?
Yeah, it's funny. I thought about that a lot, actually. I don't think it would have been good. It's hard to know, right? It's possible. I don't know the answer to that question, whether specifically it would have been better. In the end, I kind of think the answer is no, mostly because that film, while it being so subjective, and Barry's filmmaking generally tends to be so, there was something about the combination of the rawness of that movie might have sort of fallen away if I was to present in such a high resolution and such a pristine kind of quality. I mean, I'll say for me, like the DNAs, they're relatively sharp. I shot Moonlight on the Hawk V-Lights, which I love, and they were appropriate for that film. I think if I ended up on the 65 or the LF, that movie might have been a little too clean, and it might have not had the same energy as sort of what the XT had at the time with the V-Lights, for example. So it's interesting. I think it's a really interesting question. I've thought about that quite a lot in the last year or so. But because you're right in regards to its subjectivity, it's an interesting point of view. But there's something unique about everything, and I have a hard time sort of thinking in hindsight would have been better. I don't know the answer, but I kind of don't think so.
All right, thanks.
Sure. And this is the last one, yeah? So I don't know. You said 150, yeah? I mean, look how. I mean, I'm not sure if all of you can see. Some of you probably are blocked from the light and things like that in the foreground, but physically we're quite close to our subject. And I don't. I'm seeing so much. It's sort of wonderful to be able to have that same sort of 150 proximity and subjectivity and depth of field that the 150 has, but I'm seeing a little bit more now than I would be otherwise. And I think, again, a positive thing, especially for an actor who doesn't need to sort of perform quite still. You can still be, with the help of your focus puller, you can still allow for some expression and some playfulness and some performance that otherwise might be more challenged. Cool. All right. Well, let's take a break. Yeah, I think that's probably time. We'll come back, obviously, with more questions and things like that, and we'll get into some more lighting discussions. Thanks, Seth.